Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode, maybe the greatest episode of all time in the history of podcasting. Definitely the best episode that we've ever had on this show. Anyway, if you've listened to any of the stuff that I've done, my intros always start like that. I know I always say this is the best show, but this one is seriously the best. Okay, so I'm going to lead with this one. Always good to see good things happen to good people. And if you listen to episode number 5 that we did, Greg Anderson was on, and I can't say enough about what a cool, badass dude he is. He actually, in addition to just being cool and being pretty awesome, he was just on Andy Frisella's Real as Fuck podcast, which is like a real podcast, like a big podcast, and it's just blowing up. So if you have not listened to the episode that I did with him a few episodes back, I think it was episode 5, go back and check it out. And then also listen to Greg's episode on Andy Frisella's show. I think it was episode 129 of the Real AF podcast. And check that one out. But don't check it out if you are having an aversion to the F word. Lots of F words there. Yeah. Real bad language. Bad language with those two. Anyway, so all right. So today's show is kind of a repeat. So I had a guest scheduled, and then life comes up and shit goes wrong, and sometimes you just gotta adapt and overcome, right? So this is actually an older episode that I recorded on a podcast that's no longer published with JP Dinnell. JP works for Echelon Front, which is Jocko Willink's company, has a big hand in the Echelon Front muster events. That's where I met him, and got the opportunity to sit down and talk to him for quite some time, maybe a year or two ago. So this conversation is still very, very relevant and very, very good. So we talked about training as the director of training for Echelon Front, as well as having a massive career as a Navy SEAL, in doing, everything that they've done with that, as well as, the teams that he was on opposite Chris Kyle, and just all that experience with operations and training and applying it to police work. And it was just a really, really cool opportunity, and I'm still incredibly grateful that I actually had a chance to talk to him for as long as I did. So check that out and let me know what you think. So last thing I want to say is the Heroic Industries Network is up and running, and this is totally free for anybody that's interested in learning more about tactical training. We've talked a little bit about firearms, stuff like that, but mostly it's about working out and how to train for a tactical profession like law enforcement, like being a first responder specifically, because that's what I know, and I'm kind of running it, so I got to talk about what I know. But also get a lot of input from military that advises me on that. I've never done military work, so I can assume certain things, but I don't want to come across like, oh yeah, I know how to train people for the military. I was never in it. So training, lifting, jiu-jitsu, all things that I know a lot about, and police work, something I know a lot about, and then how to put it all together and make it make sense for what you need to do, so that the training and the protocols and everything that you're doing actually augments and not hurts and not impedes like the things that you're actually trying to do. And a lot of times, like, we train ways that it sounds like it should be a good idea, but it's really not. Because the training doesn't match the goals that we want. It also doesn't match the lifestyle that we have as first responders, as tactical athletes. So if you would like to be in this group, in this network, you'll get access to all the training protocols that we have, the workouts every day, and then you also get access to ask questions in the group, and basically be free to express opinions or talk more freely than you would be on social media. It's off of Facebook, it's off of Instagram, so you don't have to be part of that shit show if you don't want. And it's really just a cool thing. So if you're interested in that, all you got to do is email me back and you can just do it right through the links here and let me know, and I will put you into these groups and get you access to it right away. So that is all I got as far as news, and enjoy the replay of my conversation with JP Dinnell. JP was the lead sniper, point man, and machine gunner for Delta Platoon, which is opposite of the team that Chris Kyle was on, Charlie Platoon. He obviously worked with Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, who, if you're familiar with Extreme Ownership, wrote that book and run Echelon Front. So overall, this was one of my favorite conversations that I've had to date. When I say one of the favorite, it is my favorite, right? It was like total rock star status talking to him to just reference everything that they went over. The muster, I've read Extreme Ownership and Dichotomy of Leadership probably 3 times each. So really, really impactful books and concepts. So check it out. Let me know what you think, and hopefully you get something from it. It's almost like rock star status with you and Echelon Front and all that. Like just because I've been all over that since it started, since Extreme Ownership came out, and I heard on that first podcast with Tim Ferriss. I think I was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
So all of that combined, plus going to the muster and just having that whole experience was just so freaking cool. And
which one of the musters did you go to?
Chicago.
It was Chicago. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, man. People are always like, hey, man, I'll be like, hey, it's nice to meet you. And they're like, oh, we met at a muster. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, bro. It's crazy.
I'm going to have to be more specific. Like I said, dude, you're rock star status.
It's funny you say that. I was joking with Jocko and Echo, and we were talking about – no, I was joking around with Jocko, and then I said I need to get with Echo about making up a shirt for me. Because, everyone's like, and I was like, man, I was a fan of Jocko before it was cool to be a fan of you, bro. Just joking with him. Because when I first met him, it was, when I first met Jocko, I had that instant, draw to him, that you've experienced and a lot of people experience just because of who he is. Now, but you got to think about it. Imagine if you were in the SEAL teams and that was going to be your boss, who was going to get you ready to go overseas.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's just at a whole other level. And now that I get to continue to work from, I mean, it's amazing. It's awesome. We were talking the other day, because he's on an episode of Billions. And I don't know if you knew that. He had a little cameo in one of the episodes of Billions. And so we started kind of talking about, he's like, man, it's a really well-written show. I got sucked into it. I'm like, yeah, I did too. When I found out Jocko was on there, I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And I watched it, and it started sucking me in. And I was like, I was just asking him questions about business. I'm like, obviously, I know what we're doing with Echelon Front, and you do all this other stuff. Where do you want this to go? Do you see yourself being just. What do you want to do? Just kind of trying to figure it out. Because when he first got out, it was like, man, he's like, I'm just going to enjoy retirement, and I'm going to surf and do jujitsu. And now he's just on all these major fronts, just going to every single day, just grinding. And, he said, I'm just going to go as hard as I can at all possible venues. He has a publishing company now. And not a lot of people know that. So he was doing one of his kids' books, and he's like, hey, I need this kid's book done at this time. I need it to be launched by this date. And they're like, it can't happen. And he goes, okay. So he started his own publishing company and then got the book published within frame. Who does that?
Yeah.
So it was just, it's just, when he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And it's inspiring to be able to work alongside him and be a part of the team again. But I remember when I was in the SEAL teams, it was just, it was at a whole other level because you knew what we were going to do was going to be life and death. And you knew when he said, guys, our whole focus is to train for combat because we're going to go to combat. We're going to get in the fight and it's going to be some of the worst days and the best days of our lives. So stand by. And you're just like, awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get too deep into this, why don't you give me a rundown of kind of your background and like where you came from? Because like typically with the show, we talk about like fitness and nutrition and stuff like that, but I want to go obviously a whole nother realm with you just because like, you know, I'd like to talk more about leadership and the different aspects of kind of what went down in the muster, but more specifically, like how to apply that in like a law enforcement setting. Because as much as like the military aspects of like life in general are very similar to police work, in a lot of ways they're very, very different too. So like identifying some of the overlaps and in that relationship, if that makes sense.
Okay. So we'll start with my brief background and then you kind of ask questions of which route you want to go down.
Yeah.
And we'll start going down that route. And then when I start to deter off that route, you can pull me back and bring me back to another way.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. Grew up in Sacramento. My dad did construction. My mom taught step aerobics. Really good upbringing. We had a really good family, very close. We didn't have a lot of money, but that didn't matter. That doesn't define happiness, as I've learned, because I've been in positions where I've made a lot of money, and I've been in positions where I had no money. And I realized that obviously, if you can have some money, that makes life a little bit more comfortable and better. But truly, to define happiness, our family made the best of what we always had. And I always try to remind myself of that when I'd be in really hard times or, going through situations in the military. I just always realize that life could be a lot worse. And the things that we are lucky to have, the things that we complain about, other people to have those problems, And so I like, first world problems. Like I like to tell people all the time, your worst day is somebody's dream. Really think about that. Just think of whoever listening to this, think about one thing in the last week that you thought was just horrible, that really upset you, that was just bad in your mind. And then think about somebody in another country who would love to have that problem. Like, oh, you're sitting in traffic. You were late for a meeting because you're sitting in traffic. Guess what? You were in a car that probably had air conditioning. You weren't sitting on the side of the road at a bus stop. Like I've seen, families at bus stops, wishing, I guarantee you they would love to have that car. So I always had that mindset because we had old crappy cars that we were given to our family, or my dad would trade out work and buy it really cheap. And, we would, it wasn't nice, super nice cars, but my dad would always say, hey, at least we're not sit at that bus stop right now, because I guarantee you that family would love to be in this car right now. And I just always remember that from a kid. And so, grew up in the same house my dad grew up in, went to the same elementary school, same high school my dad went to, had some of the same teachers that my dad had, which was good and not so good. So some of them remembered him. I always wanted to join the military. I always wanted to be a Navy SEAL. That's what I wanted to do ever since I was a little boy. My brother Corey and I used to play Navy SEALs, and I was infatuated with. I was able to pursue that career. I went in the military September 5th, 2001, and 6 days later, 9/11 happened. And I knew that I had made the right decision. I had a contract to become a Navy SEAL, meaning I could go to BUD/S and try out. That was part of my contract with the military. So I had to go through my regular Navy schooling. And then once I got done with boot camp, A school, which is for your job in the Navy. Because back in the day, they used to do it to where you had to go through school before you went to BUD/S, because of the high attrition rate, because so many guys would drop out. They were sending guys out to the Fleet Navy that didn't have jobs. So they're undesignated. So now they're out on a ship. They don't have a skill set. And then it was just a big mess. So they would start doing that. it's changed now. There's a different pipeline, but that's not the purpose of this podcast. So if you guys have questions about it, go to a Navy recruiting office and ask your recruiter. Don't send me an Instagram message that says, hey, how do I join the Navy? If you can't figure out how to join the Navy, I promise you never make it through buds. I can guarantee you. Like, you have to have the drive and initiative to figure that shit out yourself. And just please go do that. And so, it was awesome being able to love being in boot camp. I love the whole military structure. I had family members that were in the military, family members that were in law enforcement. So it was very inspiring for me to go serve, and that drove me towards that. And then 9/11 happened, and it was even more of a push to make it through buds, go overseas and go to war. I wanted to kill bad people. Ever since I was a little kid, I knew the difference between good and evil. And I knew that good needs to overcome evil. And, I've never had a problem with bad people dying, and people might think that's crazy. But even when I was a little kid, I remember my mom told me a story about a guy that had done some, because there's cops in the area. We're in New Mexico visiting her family. And I asked what happened. And my parents were always very like, we're not going to sugarcoat it. This is the world that we live in. You need to understand good and evil. And my mom tells me a story about this guy that, had broken into a house and done some horrible stuff. And the cops got there, and he had a weapon, and, the cops shot him a bunch of times. And, they're being investigated as to why they shot this guy and killed him. And I remember I was a little kid. I was like, well, they killed him because he was a bad person and he had bad things. Like, what's the issue? Right. So, ever since I was little, I realized that, hey, there's nothing wrong with evil people going away from this world, because they're going to continue to do evil stuff. And there's a very real battle between good and evil. And we'll always, unfortunately, have that battle going on. And so I knew the military was going to be the route for me. That's what I wanted to do. And I absolutely loved it. I went through buds. I was in class 242. I checked in with class 242, and I graduated with those guys. And it was awesome. I went through training with the mindset that I get to do this. And there are days where it was rough, and you're tired and you're exhausted. Who cares? So what? Like, I just, I was so happy to be there, because I knew that I had the opportunity that tens of thousands of men all across the world wanted to be able to go do. And I told myself every single day, I get to do this. And, going through the training, it was awesome. I had fun. Everything that you hear about buds is true. You're cold, you're wet, you're tired, you're miserable. So what? Just change your mindset that you get to do that. And that's what I would tell myself every single day. I would say, hey, you know what? I get to do this. I was super happy, and I was young. I was in good shape. And I just told myself, I'm getting paid to work out every day and be trained by some of the most elite commandos out there. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And, I remember our instructors telling us about there's these condos in Coronado. They're right down the beach from us, called the Coronado condos. And they're a couple $1 million. That's what they start at. And I remember them telling us about that to try to mess with our mind that these, rich people were watching us get beat down and everything. And it did the opposite for me, because I'm looking down there and I'm thinking, and it clicked. I'm like, I have the same view that they have, because our barracks were right on the beach.
Yeah.
Right on the other side of the berm. Our barracks were right there looking at the ocean. And the room that I had an oceanfront view. So think about this. I'm 18, 19 years old, and I have an oceanfront property view. Other people paid millions of dollars for the same sunset. Everything was the same. I had the same beach, same ocean, same sunset, same view. Everything that they paid millions for, I had. And I was getting paid on the 1st and 15th.
I love that.
So it just changed my mindset.
I actually had that almost the same conversation. It's funny, you see parallels in things, obviously not a Navy SEAL, right? But I talked to a dude that I'm actually training on the police department now. He's a new cop in town here. And we went and played football at the same school, 10 years apart, same college. So, I talked to him and I was like, I wasn't the greatest college football player of all time, but never one day in about 20 years of playing football, high school, college, middle school, whatever, did I ever say, I don't want to go to practice because I get to do this, right? Same thing. And like less than, when you put it in perspective, like small college, big college, doesn't matter. Less than 1% of all high school football players go on to play college football. So the fact that I just had the opportunity, I loved it every day, getting my face kicked in, going, hitting people, training, like working with people. Like we played at, small college, like NAI, but national championship. Not many people say that. And then the dude that I was training, who played 10 years after me at the same college, he said the same thing. And it was nice to have that conversation that, like, just enjoying the process and staying grounded. And it actually keeps you like present in the moment and just loving the process,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And I guarantee you, you and this other guy, the reason why you'll continue doing good stuff in your life and be able to put yourself in bad positions and endure, whether it's business, relationships, physical, financial, is because you have that mindset. We would have high-level college athletes, Olympic athletes come through SEAL training that were so ever being presented and given to them, and the perfect environment always set up for them. And when all of a sudden when they're in buzz, the reality of nobody gave a shit about them kicked in and things weren't set up to serve them, guess what would happen?
Crumble.
Those guys would crumble and fall and quit. Their little perfect balanced world was no longer there, and then they're quitting training. And then you have a guy like me who is 140 pounds, wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't the quickest. I just could endure and grind it out, was making it through that training. And these guys that were used to setting records and doing all these great things are like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah. There was a dude I played high school football against. I can't remember his name, but the dude was a freak, right? He got a full ride to go to Air Force and play fullback. And he went there for, I think, 2 weeks and then quit because he couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle the structure and the schedule and the whole idea of, like, being in the military. And in my head, I was like, well, obviously he's not, like, he's got to be kind of smart. He got in, but what was he thinking? You're going to the Air Force Academy, but it's kind of that same thing. Like, what the hell were you thinking? How did this happen that this physical specimen just couldn't handle, the mental piece of it?
Yeah. So graduated from BUD/S, went through SQT, which is our advanced SEAL qualification training. And that's when I first started working with Leif Babin and Seth Stone. Leif Babin co-authored the book Extreme Ownership. Leif Babin started the company Extreme Ownership with Jocko Willink, and went through the advanced SEAL qualification training. And actually another guy, Andrew Paul, who's now one of the newest members on the Echelon Front team. So we all went through SQT together. It was awesome. We graduated SQT, but while we're going through BUD/S and SQT, the war is really starting to kick off. So the instructors that were coming back some of them actually had combat experience in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're like, hey, like, we got to drastically change the way we're training guys, because what we're doing right now overseas is completely different from what we've been training for. So it was a very unique time to go through that training. And it was cool to see the real time back and guys being able to check their ego and say, cool, yeah, let's change what we're doing to be effective. Have some of the old time guys like, that's the way we always did it. And you're like, yeah, but that's not how we need to do it going forward. And as somebody said, that's one of the things that drives me crazy is when people are like, well, that's the way we've always done it. You have to have the ability to adapt and improvise and change what you do as an individual. If you ever want to truly grow and expand, you have to have that mindset. You have to have the ability to check your ego, assess what's going on, and see if you're still on the right trajectory to success in whatever you're doing. And then we'd have these guys come back and we're like, hey, no, we need to drastically shift what we're doing. And so, we kind of had those shifts. I check into SEAL Team 3. Seth and I, we went to SEAL Team 3 Delta Platoon together. And Seth was like my big brother. If you listen to Jacques' podcast or you read the book, Seth was the Delta Platoon commander who was one of Jacques' best friends, over time. And so anyways, we went to SEAL Team 3 together. Leif went to SEAL Team 5. We did our workup deployment. He came over to SEAL Team 3, and that's when we tasked up in Task Unit Bruiser under Jocko, and had an awesome workup. We had an awesome deployment. We were able to do a lot of great stuff because of the bond that we developed with the soldiers and Marines over there in the Battle of Ramadi. And man, it was a long 6 months. We were in combat almost every single day, gunfights all day long, all night long. I mean, we were doing a major push through Ramadi, trying to secure that area. It was just crazy out there. And, it was some of the best days of my life as well. We lost some guys, unfortunately, which are the worst days of my life. But victory had been won. And, we were told that Ramadi was an unwinnable situation. And whoever's listening, you might feel like you're in an unwinnable situation, or you've been told that you're in an unwinnable situation. Don't buy into that bullshit that you or someone else is trying to feed yourself. Trust in yourself, trust in your leadership, trust in the team that you're surrounded with, and get to work. Get off the sidelines and get in the game. If you want something to change, you actually have to take action. And we knew that we had to take action. We knew that we had to take the fight to the enemy in Ramadi if we were going to make a difference, if we were going to win. And we did. And our leadership had the plan. They had the guidance of others around us, and we started working with these other units, and it came down to teamwork. If we wouldn't have worked so well with those soldiers and Marines, then Ramadi wouldn't have been won. It was a true testament to how teamwork can actually overcome situations where, you might think that you can't do anything.
So quick question there. You talked about like assessing and identifying that, like, hey, this is not how we have to do things going forward. Now, what I see a lot of times, whether it's like, like even like workouts or like physical training or in police work, is that people, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, this is good enough. It's worked for years. It's been how we do it. How do you really assess and really see that it is broken? The process is broken. Like, what kind of assessments are you doing so that you continually develop that and you can adapt and then continue to maneuver and improve?
Well, first off, you have to detach from your emotional connection to whatever that plan is. And most of the time it takes somebody in a leadership position or somebody with a position of authority to actually come in and say, hey guys, we are going to reevaluate what we're doing. Because most people, some do, but most people do not have the thought to realize that they have to constantly assess what they're doing, unless that is part of what they do and what they've been told to do. We have these balance assessments that we do in the SEAL teams. We do these assessments in the SEAL teams where, you're being rated by your peers, and you rate yourself, and you're being rated by your leadership as well. So it's 3 little levels of rating, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm progressing, I'm staying the same, or I'm going downhill. I'm not doing as well as I thought, or hey, I'm stagnant, or hey, I'm improving. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. And so you can really kind of see where you're at. And then with Echelon Front, we develop these individual leadership balance assessments so that you can be aware of where you are. Obviously, on the scale, you want to be in the dead center, but what you'll see is you're either to the left or to the right in these different categories within the 4 different laws of combat that Jocko and Leif talk about in their book, Extreme Ownership. So you just have to recognize that a good, honest, critical assessment is absolutely needed for success in all areas of your life, in all areas. And if you look at like the people who are at the top of their game, whether it's finance, IT, physical fitness, different types of business, law enforcement, military, whoever those individuals, almost all of them track everything that they do. And the reason why they track it is so they can assess their progression and growth. So they can look back and see, okay, this has worked, this hasn't worked, and they can constantly redefine what they do. you have to track it. And you're professional enough to work that into what you do. People are like, well, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to, in the morning to evaluate my day. Yeah, you actually do have time. It's just not a priority of yours. You're not allowed to say, I don't have time. Instead of saying, I don't have time, you have to say, it's not a priority. Because I can promise you can carve out 5 to 10 minutes of every single day for whatever you're doing. And that's why we would do debriefs. We did debriefs after every single thing that we did in the SEAL teams. Everything. Hey, what was good? What was bad? What are major lessons learned? Nothing? Okay, cool. Like, it's the same thing we always do. And you just get in the habit of doing those debriefs. And a debrief isn't a meeting for a meeting. It's not just everyone doesn't have to talk. It's just, hey, any major things that we learned from that? No? Okay, cool. Let's continue on. Yes? What did we learn? Okay. And then that helps the mission planning for that next evolution. And so you should start off your day with your game plan. Okay, this is what I have to do today. It's absolutely mission critical, and you have your whole list prioritized out. That should happen the day before. Because I've talked to a lot of very successful people, and they plan their day out the night. Because if they try to do it in the morning, it's more of like, this is kind of what I want to do. This is what I'm feeling. It's very rare people like have that super strong game plan when they wake up and they start the day. So do it the night before, because what you're doing is you're evaluating your whole day before you go to bed. Like, okay, here's all the things that I got done. Here's the things that I did not get done. Here's the things that are a priority because I was not able to get that done. And going forward for the rest of my week, this stuff has to get done. Okay, that goes on the day plan. So that way when you wake up, you don't have to think about it. You can say, hey, this is my plan. I'm going to have to execute. And as the day goes on, you have the ability to assess that, reevaluate what needs to happen, what doesn't, just continue on. And you'll start to develop your own little planning cycle about how you plan, how you debrief yourself, what's efficient, what's not, and constantly assessing. It comes down to discipline. That's the answer, man. Like the answer is to how do you do assessments and why do you do assessments, and what's the format? The format is what works for you based off of what your needs are. Like, I can't, like, if I was to say, hey, this is what I do to plan out my day, you'd be like, cool. None of that shit applies to me, or the way Jocko plans his day isn't going to be the way that Leif operates and does his things, right? They have different worlds, different things going on, different families. One's in California, one's in Texas. They're dealing with so many different things. They can't do that. And so you have to be disciplined to want to improve your environment. It has to be a priority. And until it becomes a priority, you'll never do anything with it. I mean, with what you do in the health industry, does everybody want to be healthy and in shape? Yeah. I mean, if you really think about it, who out there actually is like, man, I want to be unhealthy. I want to have the risk of dying young. I don't want to be able to run around and play with my kids. And I want to feel uncomfortable when I put clothes on because I know I'm fat.
I've talked to one person who actually tried to do that. I swear, this is a real conversation. This dude, when I was working in narcotics, he was doing undercover work, and he was like, I'm just trying to get as fat as possible. He was asking me about nutritional advice to get fat. And I was like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And he was like, no. You got to not look like a cop. So if I get really fat, and that's where another guy in the office actually said, like, hey, why don't you just rip your front teeth out with pliers then? You'll never look like a cop. Fat, dumb, and stupid is no way to be a cop. I don't care what you're doing.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm not going to say what I was going to say, knowing that I'm a cop that said that, because I don't want to be show any disrespect. But holy shit, come on, man.
Anyway, you're totally right. Nobody wants to be unhealthy, except that guy.
Justify that guy for that guy. I'm trying to find a way to help justify his thoughts and actions, but hey, can't fix stupid.
if you knew him, you wouldn't even try. Not even worth it.
But okay, so back to what I was saying. who out there really wants that, right? Nobody wants to be unhealthy. Nobody wants to, run the risk of not being able to run around and play with their kids, or not walk their kid down the aisle, or be able to play with their grandbabies and, have to go buy like sweatpants instead of regular jeans. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But in order for them to make that change, it has to mean something to them. There has to be value there. That why has to be greater than the other distractions and all the other things that are in their life. When I was in the teams, it was easy for me to go train extra and put in the extra time and spend time working with my gear and not go home to my girlfriend at the time in San Diego, because my priority was being as good as I could be to deploy overseas. My priority was to be there for my brothers and not fail them, is to be as strong and as healthy and as dialed in as I could for the guy to the left and right of me. And that was my driving factor. And was there times that I got complacent? Yeah, because complacency is a very real thing. And it's going to creep in, and you have to realize that you're at war with complacency every day. And that's why we shifted my talk at the muster. I'd never given that talk before. I'd never shared some of those stories before. The day before I did that, Jocko was like, hey, this is what I kind of want you to talk about. I'm like, okay. Everything else that I had planned to prep for was just gone. But he's like, that story needs to be heard, because somebody needs to recognize that and hear that. And I had multiple people come up to me and they're like, hey, man, like, thank you. I needed that. There was a couple that went to the muster that they were separated and their divorce was almost official. And the only reason why they're at the muster together is because the wife had already paid for all of it as a gift to her husband earlier that year. And after that complacency, they decided that they were going to make their marriage work, and they weren't going to allow complacency to slip in, that they were going to fight that fight together. And so if you're going through something right now in your life, realize that if it's not where you want it to be, it's because you have allowed complacency to creep in, whether it's a relationship, spouse, your kids, your parents, your coworkers, your health, your finance, your job, whatever it is. I guarantee you, complacency has crept in somewhere. And you have to identify where that complacency has crept in and come up with a game plan to go to war with that complacency. How do you defeat your enemy? Well, the first thing that you have to do is actually identify who your enemy is, what it's capable of, and where they are at. And then you can come up with a game plan of, okay, this is where they're at. This is what they actually have the ability to do. Let's go take action, right? You have to have all these little things before you can come up with a game plan. So evaluate your life. Sit back, be detached, don't be emotional, and think through it logically and say, okay, hey, this is what's going on. This is what I need to identify. And this is what I identify I need to go up against, and, come up with your game plan.
So then that goes back to just assessing. Like I'm thinking specifically, like, man, you should have like almost a daily self-assessment for complacency based on certain aspects of your life,
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, a daily self-assessment would be good. Hey, you have to be able to track, your progress.
Yeah,
sure, you do that with what you do for personal training and health and fitness, right? You track progress.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's going to be different for each client of yours, right?
Yeah.
So each individual out there needs to realize, okay, that their progress is going to be different. Now, you can use others as a baseline for where you want to be going, but you need to be very careful, always constantly judging yourself against others, because other people have just different capabilities. Imagine if I tried to compare my day against Jocko, how good do you think I would feel about myself every day?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'd feel like shit. The guy is doing everything out there, and that's just his ability. Those are his capabilities. I don't have those same capabilities. And I'm not trying to be Jocko. I'm not Jocko. I'm not Leif. I'm JP. I know my capabilities. Now, I always try to push to make that envelope a little bit fuller to better who I am so I can better serve my team and the mission that I'm currently on. But I don't try to compare myself to those guys. I don't try to compare myself to Dave Burke, who is one of the smartest guys I have met, who is able to just put everything together so perfect. I don't compare myself to Flynn Cochran, who is, again, one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He's an officer in the SEAL teams, got out, went to Harvard Business School, was working with McKinsey Group as a top consultant, and is now our chief strategy officer. Like, I don't compare myself to how they do stuff. Mike Sorelli, 10 deployments, multiple silver stars, multiple bronze stars with valor, multiple purple hearts, 20 years as an officer in the military. Was with us in Ramadi and Sadr City and went on to do other stuff. An officer in the SEAL teams at one of the highest levels has worked at commands that we don't talk about, done missions that no one will ever hear about. I don't compare myself to Mike, because if I try to compare myself to Mike, how do you think I'd feel about myself? It'd be pretty shitty. But what I do is I compare myself against where I was and whether I'm progressing or regressing. And I use guys like Mike and Dave and Flynn and Jocko and Leif as inspiration. Guys that help elevate me to that next level. Who are you surrounding yourself with? These are the guys I spend most of my time with. And then I have my other buddies that are outside of that circle that I jiu-jitsu and, hang out with in Texas they're always constantly elevating themselves. And so it pushes me to do the same. But you have to do your own assessment and realize what your baseline is and come up with a game plan. And I think your idea of a very basic daily assessment would be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be something as easy as like, all right, let's say just like my physical, my finances, maybe like, I don't know, like faith or something like that, like whatever categories, like basic categories you wanted to include. And then at the end of the day, it could almost be like a 1 or a 0. Were you complacent with this? Yes or no? And then tomorrow you got to do more to combat that. I mean, it could be that simple, at first, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's, So, anyway. You need to do that based off of what your individual, needs are, for sure.
All right, transitioning a little bit, like if you're talking at the muster, you spent a decent amount of time talking about like your transition out of the military and how that was. And then I guess two questions with that based on your talk. Like, number one, I guess before that, like you had that injury. It was a shoulder injury, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the shoulder injury basically like sidelined you, and then you had to change gears. And I know personally I've been through that like multiple times. In college, like I said, I spent not a whole lot of time playing on the field in football because I was busted up a lot of times. And then since I've been a cop, like I've had some major hip surgeries. I've had both my hips replaced, and that sidelined me for a long ass time. So I didn't get to go with the SWAT team that I'm on and do operations. I had to sit at home and rehab for 3 months at a time. So if you could just kind of like spend a little bit of time talking about that, like the injury and how it changed your perspective, and then and that kind of stuff.
So I had to have shoulder surgery. Well, my first platoon, I had shoulder surgery, and it kept me out of the workup for a little bit. And they were actually going to pull me and put me in another team. And I got like super emotional and upset. And I said, no, there's absolutely no way I can be pulled from this. There's no way. I will do everything I need to. I will be at every block of training and doing rehab. I don't need to, if I can't physically do the training, I'll be there. Please just let me stay. I was very thankful that they did, because that kept me at team 3. And then I did my surgery, my rehab, was smart with it, and was able to deploy, came back. We did Ramadi, I was having issues. Get back from Ramadi, have surgery on my shoulder, and it was no, I'm sorry. The first one, they were going to have surgery. That's right. I've had a couple surgeries. I got mixed them up. Sorry. We were going to have surgery, and we were doing everything we could with rehab. I didn't have to have surgery. And I remember, so I did that. But then after Ramadi, my shoulder kept having issues. And so I had surgery and ended up with some nerve damage. So I got pulled from that platoon. Well, that platoon, I was supposed to be going back overseas to deploy to Solder City in 2008. And Mike Sorelli, who was junior officers with us in Ramadi, he was on the rooftop when Mikey jumped on that grenade. He was one of the guys that Mikey saved. Still has shrapnel in his body from that grenade blast. And Mike Sorelli is an amazing combat leader, and I wanted to work for him so badly again. I loved being deployed with Mike. He was an amazing officer, an amazing leader, and I was like, cool, we're going. And then Seth, who was my platoon commander, was going to be the task unit commander. He he took Jocko's position, right? I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You know, Seth is now the task unit commander. Mike Sorelli is who Seth was. I was like, yes, like this is going to be awesome. And I got pulled, man. And that was, that was like a nightmare for me, is getting pulled from those guys. You know, I had all that combat experience. I was a sniper. I was in a position of leadership. And then now all of a sudden, when they found out that I wasn't going to be able to do the workup properly, they pulled me so I couldn't deploy. And I got pulled over into training command. And I was depressed. I was pissed off. I was upset. Now, when I first started doing my rehab, I was all about getting dialed in and getting back in the game. And I let that depression and that being upset about missing out creep in. And I didn't rehab like I should have. I started drinking a lot, and, my performance went downhill in regards to my ability to teach, my physical performance, everything. Like I let my world fall apart because I didn't more. And it wasn't until Jocko sat me down. He's like, JP, your mission has changed. Like, yeah, I would love for you to go overseas and be a sniper and be in the fight, but that's not your job anymore. Like, your job right now is to be the best instructor that you can be, so that we don't have to put on our dress blue uniforms and go to another fucking funeral. And excuse my language, and I apologize, but that's what he told me. And I remember that's exactly what he said, because it was a very harsh reality that our guys are getting wounded overseas. Our guys are in the fight. And then I needed to take my job serious and absolute best instructor I could be. Because if you're a gunfighter at heart, do you really want to be an instructor? No, right?
Right.
No, that's not what you want to do. Now, are there times that you need to be an instructor? Absolutely. Maybe you have something going on at home. Maybe your wife and kids need you home. Maybe your health, right? Or maybe just the needs of your unit and organization are greater than yours. And there needs to be an instructor because you don't have enough instructors and you have a lot of experience. Well, guess what you can do? You can equip the rest of the team and your unit and organization to be better. So there are times you have to step back and realize that the mission's needs are above your needs. Always. It's always like that. And so I didn't realize that because I was young and I was immature and I was in an emotional state, and I just, needed that readjustment, that retune from Jocko. And so it was from that point I realized, okay, this is my new mission. And when I had established what that new mission was, I was obsessed with being just as good of an instructor as I could be, as equipping these guys around me to go overseas. And, there's guys that were like, hey man, we're getting ready to deploy overseas. We want to go up to the facility and do some CQC and some shooting. We need an instructor. Are any of you guys able to go up there? And other guys are like, man, we just got back from a 5-week trip. We were on the road for 5 weeks, right? Like, nobody wants to go up to that area and for a week, right? And then be up there. And I was like, yeah, I'll go with you guys. I'll run the training, because these guys were getting ready to go overseas. And my job as an instructor was to help support them. And so there was, there was that shift in mindset, and I became re-engaged, and it was awesome. And, and I got selected to try out for another unit, and I got to deploy to Afghanistan, did some awesome stuff as an augment. And then I was trying out for this other unit, and I got hurt and injured during the selection. I actually dislocated my left shoulder doing pull-ups. I put it back in, and I finished the screen test, but they noticed that. They did some medical evaluations later that week, and they're like, "Hey, man, you're cut from training." And I was like, "What?" I was like, I passed the test. Like, I'm good. They're like, your body's not where it needs to be. And even if you are able to make it through the training, even though our training is very dangerous, and we can't run the risk of that dislocating during some sort of training, like we do to the unit or another group with that possible injury, like they're the number one priority. Okay, I dig that, and I respected that, and I understood that. I said, okay, and they're like, well, good stuff in Afghanistan. You have a good reputation over here. We're going to keep you out here for surgery and rehab. I was like, awesome. So that was on Wednesday. On Friday, they had an MRI scheduled for me, and that following Friday, I was having surgery. I mean, that timeline for that is just right? And like no other military group. And like I tell guys in the regular teams, like, what? I've been waiting 3 months to get an MRI. It's just crazy how they're able to do that so quickly. And so I had surgery and rehab, and my mindset was completely different on this one. My only job was rehab, to recover, to be as good as I could be so I could get back in the fight again. And, that was true. And instead of being able to do stuff like I was wanting to do, I got pulled back to San Diego because TRADET was undermanned, and they needed as many instructors as possible. And I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And so anyways, got back to San Diego, re-engaged in training, and it was good. And I ended up getting out of the military because my mission has changed, and, wife and kids, and my wife was pregnant with twins, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. And I made the decision to get out of the military. I had just under 12 years in the teams. And, I needed to be doing something for my family at that point in time. And that's why I made that decision. And yes, I miss it every single day. People are always like, well, do you miss it? Yeah, every single day. But you have to realize that when your mission shifts, you have to be aware of that. And you can't keep living over here when this is where you're supposed to be focused at. And I think that's the issue that a lot of law enforcement, firefighters, and veterans have, is when they're transitioning to these new roles or new periods in their life, they're stuck on how things used to be. Well, that's great. But that was a chapter in your book, and your life is a series of books. And you have to realize that you have to make every chapter as good as possible. And you can't have that super long chapter. As many people as may, sometimes you might have that 20, 30 year career, but eventually that chapter is going to end. And if you can't move on to that next chapter, you're going to hold yourself and you're going to hold everybody around you back. And that comes down to you being able to evaluate and assess where you're at and re-engage with the new mission.
Yeah, I would even say that if you can't do that, it's not just holding yourself and other people back. It's like legitimately actively pulling yourself and other people with you, because you have to be able to. And like the big thing that jumped out to me with that is you're talking about transitioning due to like, man, I know exactly how you feel, because when your body keeps breaking down like that, you're like, what in the fuck do I have to do to stay in one piece here?
Yeah.
And I'm working my ass off to do these things that I know that I'm just as good, if not better, than all these other people to do. And it sucks. And it is, but once you take that new role and you take ownership of it, and you're like, all right, this is me. This is who I am now. I am no longer this person here based on circumstances today. And if I don't change my thought process on this, then I'm going to continue to be just a horrible person. And, it's just that whole concept of extreme ownership again,
Yeah, you have to recap what's going on and re-engage. That's one of the things I love. Mike Shirley has a talk that he talked about at the muster. And for those people who are like, what do they keep saying the muster for? The muster it's a 2-day leadership event that Jocko and Leif created for individuals, companies, whoever. Like, it's individual ticket sale. You can come, and it's a 2-day event. I personally feel, and I felt this before I was a part of Echelon Front, that it's one of the best leadership, individual, whatever you want to call it, type of training out there. Now we call it leadership training because that's the base of what we do. And leadership is an individual action, right? And it's leadership goes up and down the chain of command. It doesn't matter who you are, right? You're in a position of leadership somewhere in your life. That's why we call it that. But it's you don't have to be in a position of, quote, leadership in what you're doing in life to benefit from the muster. Like I said, we've had spouses come together to work their stuff out. We've had parents come and say, hey, we just want to learn to be better parents for our family. We've had CEOs, and we have all the way down to like where people sent their baseline employees there to improve. So that's what the muster is. And where was I saying? I went down this.
You know what? Like, I don't remember, but actually, let's stay right on that topic. All right, you got it. Never mind. Go ahead.
What Mike Sorelli talks about at the muster in his talk is about, hey, you're going to get knocked down, but get back up and get in the fight, right? Recalibrate and re-engage.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do as individuals.
Yeah. And like a lot of times what we talk about with our athletes here, and then even like, new cops on the department, it's not that like you're never going to get knocked down. You're going to. And to me, I almost look forward to it. I'm like, all right, cool. So like, I'm going to get knocked down, but I know that I'm going to keep getting back up, and I'm going to keep getting better. And if it's kind of like I'm a big comic book fan, and you see a hero that has all the powers, like, and they just dominate everybody. Unless there's some challenge and some stress where you have the potential, the real potential to get knocked down, then it's no fun. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. I was, we were at jiu-jitsu last night with our kids, and they're talking about a tournament. And our kids, we've been traveling this whole summer with them. We had the ability to do that this year, and so we did that. And we just went a lot of different places, and we just shifted our priorities on. We were saving money, and we're like, all right, we're going to spend a little money this summer, but we're going to get experiences for our kids and make the most out of what we do. So it was a lot of fun. But we also knew that by doing that, the kids weren't going to be consistent in their jiu-jitsu and all their other stuff, and it was just going to be rough. So they're back. We're back. We're engaged, and they start school next week, and they're at jiu-jitsu last night. And it was rough for them. They were hating life. And Amanda and I, my wife Amanda, we were getting on to them. Like, hey, just because you're tired, don't quit. Like, keep pushing hard. Like, hey, we had a talk with them last night. We're like, hey, when you guys are doing wind sprints, if you ever stop 6 inches before that line again, you're going to be in trouble. Like, you go past the line. Don't ever quit. Don't ever short what you're supposed to be doing, because that becomes a habit, and that's not who we are. We don't do that. And we were having this, and they're like, yeah, I know we're tired. I'm like, I don't care. Like, and my wife was like, I don't care that you're tired. So what? Push harder. And I was like, yeah, get her. And like, and it was just like that mindset of like, you have to push harder. And, we were talking about this. There's a kids tournament, and they're like, I don't want to do it. Like, we're tired, and we haven't been training this summer. And Amanda was like, you guys don't have to. Don't worry. And I told, what my one daughter, she's been training hard and she's been competing. But man, every competition she's done, she's gotten just bigger, stronger, better kids, and she's every one. Like, it's kind of like, damn, could you like give her, like, can she get like one that's somewhat equal to her? It's just the way it is for their age, right? And they're girls, and I have twin girls, they're 7. And so they're getting paired against like older boys who have been training longer. Well, guess what? They're going to lose, right? And it's some of them, it's like, God, dude, she got her ass whooped. And she didn't want to, and she's like, kind of had tears in her eyes. She's like, Daddy said I don't have to compete. I'm like, that's fine. You don't have to. But you will compete again. And she's like, I keep losing. I'm like, oh, that's okay. I'm like, guess who cares if you lose in a jiu-jitsu tournament? Nobody. I was like, you're a kid. You're doing jiu-jitsu, and it's only going to get you better. I was like, so the next time you compete, you lose. When you lose, I want you to shake the person's hand and say, thank you for making me better. And she's like, what? I was like, I want you to say that, because you're not out there just to compete as a kid. You're doing this to be better so you can defend yourself and defend others. And I was like, and as you get older, if you want to continue competing, you will win. And you're going to win championships if you ever want to. If you stick with this, you absolutely will. And it was just realizing that I had to have a different conversation with my 7-year-old daughter than I do the men at the gym, right? Because the guys at the gym, when they're preparing for competitions, they ask me to kind of help them prepare them and work with them on mental stuff. And I'm like, it's going to be slightly different when I talk to my 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
But the base of what I was trying to explain to her is like, you're going to continue training and you're going to get back in the fight. You can't allow yourself to be out of it just because you've had some stuff go against what you wanted. You know, you've experienced some losses, you've got knocked down, but take some joy in that. It's in a controlled environment. It's in training. Get back in the fight. You know, and that's what I think a lot of people don't realize is they're allowed to get back in the fight. They don't need permission from anybody else. Whatever you're doing in life right now, if you feel like you've been knocked out and down and you're out of the fight, get back up, re-engage, and get back after it.
Yeah, take some risks, you know?
Yeah.
So, shifting gears completely, sort of. During the muster, Jocko talked about training and like the whole aspect of discipline equaling freedom, right, is to me is training. Like you need to train in every aspect of what you do, and the training has to be difficult. It has to make you better. So one thing that we hear a lot on our department is like, well, we need to train to the least common denominator to make sure everybody can get through this training. And I've never been a fan of that ever in my entire life, to only provide a low bar. And I understand why they say that, but to me, it's just holding everybody back and not demanding more.
Explain to me why you understand why they say that. It's hard for me to do that.
So I understand the argument. I don't adhere to it. You know what I mean? But so training to the least common denominator, right? So there's certain check boxes that we all have to get through as law enforcement in order to keep our certifications and to stay, you know, qualified and that kind of stuff. So the training has to be something that everybody can get through in order to get everybody to continue to be cops. I get that. But at the same time, that least common denominator, it shouldn't just stop there. Like that's the low bar. And the demand should be like that the least common denominator stuff is taken care of, like without a second thought, so that we can move on to some more things.
Yeah, no. You're going to get somebody killed training at the least common denominator, you know? You can't, that cannot be the baseline. You know, you have to constantly be pushing yourself. If you're training, thank you. If you're training at the lowest common denominator, then you're actually going to start pulling back some of your top tiered individuals and top professionals. And then they're going to slowly start dropping down towards that baseline. And you're going to have a lower performing group than if you're always pushing. What forces you to grow if you're always at the lowest common denominator?
Nothing. I mean, yeah. Now, I guess like question that, because I totally agree with you. How do you take an organization of 500 to multiple thousands, let's say a police department, for example, and change that culture and that mindset?
Well, it starts with one person believing in what that culture and mindset should be, and one person buying into that mindset, right? That shift. It's a slow progress, but it can also be a very fast progress depending on the momentum of the team, right? And the shifting of getting behind it. if it's not properly communicated, it's going to be very hard behind it, and you have to show people why it's important that we train at this level. And in law enforcement, we talk with first responders all the time, and a lot of them are like, well, this is the way we've always done it. These are the standards. You don't understand it. It's hard enough for us to get people to come want to do this job. We're kind of taking who we can right now. Like, if we raise the standards, we wouldn't get enough people in. It's like, okay, those are all excuses.
Yes.
Sorry. And someone's going to be upset, but that's an excuse. And you have to hold the line. Realize what you guys do every single day isn't a normal job. It's not a normal job.
Right.
You're not an IT company. You're not a pharmaceutical company. You're not a construction company. You're the barrier between society. And you're telling me that you can hold the line, that you can't enforce standards? If you enforced high standards and you made training mandatory, if you made combatives mandatory, if you made optimal health levels and performance levels mandatory, you wouldn't be having the issues that you're having out there on the streets. You wouldn't be having cops with excessive force issues and lawsuits against you. If your cop had the confidence and had actually trained properly in combatives, they wouldn't have to pull out their baton and use that, because if they had basic jujitsu skills and if they were healthy, they would be able to handle themselves. If you actually enforce personal development and leadership development amongst your officers, you wouldn't have integrity violations out there. And I'm getting a little fired up, but I'm sorry, like, what you guys do out there and gals do is extremely important. You are here in society between everything completely falling apart. So why would you not want those standards higher than the rest? How could you not take pride in being the best damn cop out there when you put your uniform on? Having that sense of pride and knowing that all your gear is clean and polished and tweaked, and that you're in the best physical shape that you could be. In the extra reps so that you can be the response that is needed. If you're in an altercation, if you're in an emergency, if you're in the worst situation that a cop could possibly be in, would you want to be the cop that responds to your call? And if the answer is no, then you need to get to work. And you need to truly think about that. Would you want to respond to your own call?
I ask myself that daily. That's one of the things that myself and another officer that were involved in a shooting, and it was a pretty gnarly one. But we got to go and do a little presentation to our recruits on that shooting. And that's what I told them, that I always trained to the standard of, if I had to take that shot for my own kid, would I want it to be me? And if the answer is no, then I need to find a new job or make some serious adjustments in my life. And God willing, so far it's always been yes. So right on. I love that. So with making those changes to making it not the least common denominator, like, obviously there would be a lot of benefit from the physical health of our officers to the morale and mental state. You know what I mean? Like, you're just going to be in a better space if people believe in you enough to push you, so there's not going to be the negativity and the complaining and that kind of stuff. But oftentimes we run into politics. And I'm sure you experience this in the military too. How do you keep morale with, like, your core group of people, which hopefully will push to everyone, but how do you keep morale when you don't trust your leadership? Because right now in the state of law enforcement, like, people are afraid to go out and do proactive police work. There's a whole, like, kind of atmosphere of fear of liability and being totally risk averse, because they don't want to be hung out to dry based on, like, a use of force issue that may or may not be that may be approved and fine based on Supreme Court. Like the use of force might be fine, but we don't, quote, like how it looks, right? So then all of a sudden as an officer, it's like, man, I did everything right, but I'm still being hung out to dry on this. And so how do you keep morale up when things like that are going on with people in charge?
Well, I mean, that the attitude is contagious, whether it's good or bad, and it goes up and down the chain of command. Okay, let's say you don't trust your leadership. Let's say you have a bad boss. You have to keep your team engaged, and you don't have to be in a position of leadership to keep your team engaged, to keep them driven, to keep them focused, to keep them accountable. I was the youngest junior ranking guy in our task unit, and Jocko pulled me aside. He was like, "Hey, JP, I need you to be a little more aggressive during this training to keep the guys engaged. If you see an out, like while we're doing an IAD, immediate action drill, if you see an out, I want you to be that guy that's just like loud, getting the guys driving, keep them focused and push them. And when these training ops get hard, I want you to keep the guys engaged. When you guys are out on the road training, I want you to keep the guys dialed in and push them harder." He just knew that's who I was as an individual. I didn't care I was the youngest guy, the most junior ranking guy. I believed in what we were doing. And so sometimes as a leader, you have to find some of your key little soldiers out there and give them that push and say, "Hey, I need you to help me out, man." And when Jock would come to say, "JP, I need you to help me out," I was willing to do whatever he needed because I respected him and I trusted in him. And trust me, there's leaders above Jocko that I didn't trust, that I didn't respect. If they're like, "Hey, JP, I need you to do this," I'd be like, "Roger that, sir." And I might get to it when I needed to, when they reminded me that it needed to be done, right? You know what I'm saying? We've all had, now, is that the right thing? No. But just that's human nature, and I realize that that's what I would have done. And now I know that my mindset was shifted and changed. But we know that we'll do stuff for people we have influence with. So you have to maintain the vision of what that mission is and why you're out there fighting, why you guys do what you do. Remind your fellow officers the good that you do every day. Yes, you see darkness every single day, but look at that other officer when they put their uniform on. That's the light you focus on. The kid that you go from a domestic abuse, right? The kid that was being trafficked, like all these horrible things that happen. You guys do great stuff every single day. And you have to find the light in that. And you have to remind those around you the good that you're doing and the reason why it's important for you to do what you do. You know what? If you don't trust your upper leadership, if they're not guiding you, if they're not pushing you, good. You get to do it yourself. You take ownership of your unit, your organization, and you push them to where they need to be. You don't need permission from your upper leadership and the higher ups to do your job the right way. You know what you're capable of. You know what you're supposed to do. You guys all know your left and right lateral limits as to what you can and can't do in your job. Make sure you're doing it the right way, the ethical way, and just keep driving and pushing your team. It's like a gang mentality. You hold yourselves accountable. You police yourself. You don't need your bosses to come in and police yourselves as far as to what you do and what you don't do. You know what the right and wrong answers are. So you hold yourself accountable. And hey, backbone, and stand up for what is right and what is wrong. Say, hey, no, that's not how we do stuff. We had a sense of pride in being a part of TU Bruiser. We were very prideful for being a hard-working task unit. We out-trained every other task unit out there because our leadership pushed us to do that. And yeah, guys would complain when you'd be on the road and we didn't have like all the free time we thought we would to go out and party but when we started to outperform all the other units, guess what? We had a sense of pride. And, we built that through hard work, and it wasn't an instant over. It took time. You have to be patient with that change.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. The what you said really resonated as far as like, you just focus on the guy next to you, the girl next to you, whoever it is, Like that to me is where, especially as street officers, we need to not be worried about these macro problems as far as like politics and use of force issues and that kind of stuff, because we can't affect any of those changing that. You know what I mean? But the micro level, like me, the guy next to me, my partner I'm riding with, like our behavior, our accountability to each other, those are the things that we have influence over, and those are the things that we need to focus on. And that is, really what I think is important from a street level, like patrolman level.
Yep, agree.
Awesome, man. What else you got? That's everything that I had. And I guess if there's any other comments you want to leave us with, or let us know, like where can people find more about you? When's the next muster? Like, let's hit some details like that.
The next muster is in Denver, Colorado. It's in September 19th and 20th. We announced that it was sold out. I think they might have opened up some more seats. I think but I'm not officially saying that because I don't want to get in trouble if we didn't. Then after that, the following muster is in Sydney, Australia in December. And then we're getting ready to announce and roll out the 2020 dates for the next muster. I know we have another roll call coming up, and roll call is an event that's just for first responders, government, city, county employees. It's awesome. It's just a one-day event. Price point is much less. It's just geared towards what you guys do every single day. We haven't announced that yet. I'm trying to figure out dates and location. But if you want to follow me on social media, it's at JP Dinnell at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So it's JPDINNELL. It's just like dinner, but with 2 L's at the end. You can find me on there. If you want to learn a little bit more, Origin did a little Go Time series. It's a little mini documentary. So if you go to originmaine.com, ORIGINMAINE.com, it's actually on their page of videos there. You can find it on YouTube. It's actually crazy. It has 1 million views, which was just crazy. And that's Origin's got some awesome products. They're bringing manufacturing back to the United States, which is amazing with what they're doing with their gis, rash guards, and now jeans and boots. I have a pair of the jeans. I have 4 pairs of jeans, 2 for myself, 1 for my brother, 1 for my cousin. They're the most comfortable jeans I've ever had. They're amazing. So those are the companies I'm connected with and associated with. Obviously, with what I do, everything that I do is with Echelon Front. A lot of people have reached out to me like, hey, come talk to my company, come do whatever. It's all through Echelon Front. If you try to side door Echelon Front, I will lose absolutely all respect for you, and I will not communicate with you. I'm not going to ever screw over Jocko and Leif, so don't even try to go that route. Go through the route of Echelon Front, all right? That's what we do. That's the team I'm a part of. I'm a director of our field training exercises, which is all of our hands-on scenario-based leadership training, where we take teams, we put them in stressful scenarios, where we give them intel packages where they have to go conduct a capture-kill mission against my role players. And those scenarios help deliver the hands-on leadership training. Through hands-on stress-induced leadership training, it delivers the leadership principles that we teach through Echelon Front that Jocko and Leif wrote about in their book, Extreme Ownership. So if you want more information from that, you can send me a message on social media or just go to echelonfront.com. That's ECHELONFRONT.com. So that's where it's at. I appreciate the time to be on this podcast, be a part of what you're doing. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the service of all really appreciate it. If there's anything we can do for you guys, please reach out, let us know. And hopefully we can connect again soon, man.
Absolutely. And likewise, thank you for your service as well. I'm always amazed at the level of humility with you and everybody at Echelon Front. I talk about a bunch of guys that really don't need to be as humble as you are. And the fact that you are just speaks volumes of you personally. So awesome. Thank you so much again. We'll definitely do it again.
All right. Thanks, man.